to our business tourism webinar today, joined by 4 fantastic speakers, and also on the screen you'll see a familiar face, Steph Newton, who heads up our convention bureau here in Manchester. So we're joined today, there's about 100 registered this morning, all conference and events venue operator and providers across GM. So basically our partners, and then this webinar, the live link, recorded live link, will be sent out to everyone else that wants to see it. So just as a brief introduction, I'll spend a few minutes giving you an introduction overview, and then I'll go into introduce each speaker. Each speaker will speak for about 10 minutes. You'll have question time for each speaker, and at the end, time for questions at the end. So keep your questions coming in, and I'll try and address most of those in the next the time we've got. So really, prior to the COVID outbreak, Greater Manchester was really cooking on gas. Business tourism, meetings and event industry was really riding high in early 2020. Business tourism is worth 862 million to the GM economy, and we just produced a new 5-year business visits and events strategy, and we're ready on course to accelerate further growth. So we know we're strong. We knew we had a great year. Marketing Manchester's business tourism team are on track for one of the best years yet for conference wins. Just to rattle off a few of those, and I'm going to read them because they're quite long titles. So recent wins, we've got the 30th International Conference on Amorphous and Nanocrystalline Semiconductors in 2023 that we won. That's economic impact of 2.1 million. Secondly, the annual meeting of health technology assessments with the economic impact of 3 million, and international conference on microzia on 2023, which is about 2 million. So some great, science-based. We know that we've got strength in associations on the science-based side. So some really strong messages coming into the year, but we know we have challenges now. Cancellations, postponements right across the whole industry with all venue types. So I know that you've all been experienced with that. We're all in the same boat, and it's been widely accepted that this sector coming out of lockdown will feature on the government's roadmap as perhaps one of the later industries to come out. However, whilst the future of our business tourism is maybe uncertain, we have got a bit of good news this week to share with you all. So ICA, which is the prestigious International Congress and Convention Association, which you all know, the annual report is out this week, and Manchester managed to leap 11 places up to 82nd in the world, and that means we're 4th in the UK. So there's some movement there. So just on that positive note, I'd like to now introduce you to some great positive speakers. And first of all, Karen McPhee, who is Head of Business Events at Visit Britain, and was prior to that was in Liverpool ACC. Martin Fullard, many of you would know Martin, editor at Conference News from Mash Media, and he's speaking to us from sunny Surrey this morning. Sarah Palin, who's Strategic Partnership Director at Ocean Media Group and also Chartered Institute of Housing. Some of you will know Sarah well too. And Sean Hines, who I'm sure you'll all know, Chief Executive of Manchester Central, and also host to our Nightingale New Hospital. So I'm just going to go straight into, without further ado, in terms of the running order. Karen's up first from Visit Britain. And Karen, over to you to say your piece, and then I'll take some questions at the end.
Thank you very much. I just need to get my slides live, so there we are. So thanks, everybody.
And feel free to ask questions as we go.
So hopefully, firstly, everybody can hear me. And secondly, everybody can see the slides. So I'm Karen McPhee, Head of Business Events, and thank you, Shona, for that introduction. I'm delighted to be here. The Northwest is my home. I promote the whole of the UK, but it's good to be here this morning, sort of talking with you. Just wanted to share where we are. I was asked to cover certain areas this morning, so hopefully The slides I am going to run through, and I mean run through, hopefully we can have questions later on after my session and at the end of the sort of all the speakers, just to tell you where Visit Britain is in relation to COVID-19 and what our response is. So we are past what we call the crisis point. So at crisis, we as business events had an open letter to industry to basically say, you know, as an industry united, we're stronger together, we're in it together. So a message of solidarity and support. And that was very, very well received, shared with over 100,000 people globally. And the videos, I think, were watched about 20,000 times. So we're now in early recovery stage, so we're sort of past the peak. So our messaging's changing and we're working really hard and fast to develop all those right messages. And then we'll go into recovery where we'll start to manage the demand, and then further recovery where we'll actually build that demand and retain the demand. So just wanted to kind of set the scene. So I know that we've just mentioned the value of tourism. Tourism in general, I'm talking not just business events here, is huge to the UK. You know, it's the third largest service export. Over 200,000 small to medium businesses are part of this, and it's worth 126.9 billion to the UK, 3.1 million jobs, 9.6% in terms of total jobs. So it is significant. You can see more information on statistics and anything in regards to that on the Visit Britain website, which is bottom right on the slide. And hopefully we can share the slides so you can take time to look over them and get back to me with any questions. So just a bit of the journey that we've been on to date, unprecedented journey. So January to February, it was pre-lockdown. So what happened in the UK is we started to lose those Chinese huge groups, those group bookings, lost those. Then countries were advised against outbound travel. So we began to see a reduction in inbound travel. We had some cancellations and the forward bookings started to decline. And we were still required to give refunds. And then we go into lockdown. So the government announces the support, but there's no detail on what or how to apply for this support. Public are advised not to go out to public places. Businesses are forced to close in the UK, and now all bookings are cancelled. What issues come out of that? There's no cash flow since January or earlier if it's seasonal that sort of drives business. Staff have been furloughed, but key services need to be maintained, and there are potential forward bookings and there's nobody to speak to. Businesses required to give refunds within 14 days to keep in line with rules and regulations. Insurers won't pay out. Some businesses out of scope of government support. Government loans are hard to get, grants inconsistent and or slow to arrive. So not a fantastic position to be in. And then the government developed the roadmap. So the roadmap was sort of created, but there are still issues facing the tourism industry. So if you just look down at the list on the left, you know, cash flow furlough, community confidence was sort of nigh on not there. How to operate safely, it was unknown. Social distancing versus financial viability, you know, stress being created here. Consumer confidence, big issue. And indoor versus outdoor versus parks. So many questions yet to be answered. So with all of that happening, where did we Visit Britain see our role in all of this? So we developed a program, a significant program with a whole variety of projects, 7 projects, 3 covering recovery, 5 covering recovery and 3 covering industry. So I'm just going to pull out some of the key elements here in relation to business events and what we're doing. So in one of the recovery streams, it's crisis communications and first response messaging. We, the business events team, are working collaboratively with the marketing team who focus on B2B and consumer comms to get that message right, to get that message loud and clear so we remain front of mind in this first response important step. Another area that we're going to focus heavily on is the global sales framework. So the global sales framework talks to our extended sales team across the world, giving them the tools that they need to promote and sell the UK and give that confidence boost. And on the industry side, the English landscape is where we're helping to develop a clearinghouse, and that clearinghouse will help with demand as it hopefully spikes towards the end of the year. And I'll touch on that a bit later on. And working on a kite, it's not a kite mark, but it's a kite mark equivalent, where it's a standard that will be across the industry so that consumers, buyers will understand what it is and have that confidence to book the UK again, and very, very soon. There's a lot happening in all of these projects, and there's a lot of work streams within the projects, and happy to answer more later. So industry support and communications, what are we doing? We're monitoring the impact. We're sharing evidence of the issues, helping government to develop and shape their support. We're providing international business event support, keep in front of mind, one-to-one messaging, and we're updating industry very regularly through the dedicated business hubs, e-commerce, and website, which is updated daily. So what messaging do we have right here, right now? So we're using these pillars that you can see on the screen to get messages out to markets. You know, we're looking at the performance of these messages and the sentiment sort of from those markets. And as we get to understand what's happening in markets, which we evaluate, we'll change those messages to keep relevant. It's really important to be out there, to keep relevant. Using our owned and earned channels, we get lots of messages out. These are just examples of how we bring those pillars to life. And we actually send out sort of, you know, pictures that can be coloured in, which are really well received, and some great menus there. So really engaging with community in as big a way as we can. And we're shouting about the economic importance of tourism to keep that absolutely centre stage through all of what we do. A couple of months ago, April, 6th of April, which seems like an absolute age ago, the business events team, because of the potential demand, we don't know that it will come, we hope it will come, we took a survey through all our 21 destinations, who told us what events had cancelled and what events had postponed from that point through to the end of the year. And it wasn't great. You can see here £286 million worth of cancellations and postponements combined. Now, that value is created from a research study on delegate spend. So this is only, and I stress only, the money that comes out of the delegate pocket or purse. This isn't the greater economic sort of impact of these events. So, you know, we know that it will be much higher, but I'm going specifically on delegate spend. If we look at the graph tells us both from a national and international business perspective, you know, where we are now. You know, we've lost the business, I say lost, the postponed business, some has gone into next year. Some has booked, but it's still not a very, very good picture that's being painted there. For me, the big question is, of the £58 million worth of delegate spend bookings that have not rebooked, when are they going to rebook? Will they rebook? So what's happening at the moment is a clearinghouse is being created where we are contacting English destinations to understand through all of those venues that can accommodate 250 people or more for a meeting, what is their availability like? And we're getting to understand availability so that where there is a bottleneck, we can actually push that business so it takes place rather than not take place at all. And we're going to be monitoring this month on month, so we hopefully see that availability disappear and we don't see that availability increase. Then we'll know that we're really helping to support, you know, sort of the meetings to get back in whatever way we can. So right here, right now, the activity that's being focused on by the business events team to really keep front of mind, to stay in touch with that business events buyer community across Europe, North America, and in the UK. We've launched Meet GB Virtual. This was launched late last Thursday, so it's very, very new. We're actually reaching out to buyers to say, come and learn, come and talk, come and be educated about what the UK has to offer. This is not a platform for sales. It's not the right time to sell at the moment. So we're targeting buyers who will have one-to-one meetings with our destination booths. we have venue booths, we have other sort of DMC booths, a whole raft of supply who are going to be on the virtual show floor. There'll be 66 booths. Each of those booths can have 6 supporters, participants. There can be a lot of activity on that show floor. So we're targeting 136 buyers for the one-to-one meetings. We're targeting trade visitors in their thousands to come and meet and talk and share and virtually network with us in this really, really unique place. We're focused on UK buyers here. We need to focus on the domestic market because we know that there are many, many UK-based buyers who take their business away. They take it internationally. So we want to give those buyers a solution. And then we also want them to rediscover what the UK has to offer and maybe decide to stay in the UK moving forward. Post this event, which takes place over 2 days, the 17th and the 23rd of June, the platform will be open for a month. So we can drive traffic to that platform to really understand what the UK has to offer. So that's really forefront at the minute of all of our sort of activity. All our energy is focused on that. So what other plates are we spinning in regards to keeping relevant, being out there, making sure that we are helping to keep business events UK front of mind? So when the time is right, bookings will come. We've just opened the Business Events Growth Programme. That will help in bidding for events for the future now. So there is money there to support organisations to do just that. We are launching very, very soon virtual discoveries, and virtual discoveries will keep in touch with the buyer community and get them to imagine what they can do in the UK, discover more about the UK. We're developing a bidding toolkit that will have advocacy support in there as standard and many other tools to help anybody who is bidding, whether that's PCO, destination, helping them to bid for events moving forward. We've actually won some events of late for 2023 and onwards. We're helping destinations in bidding for events into the future. So in that regard, although it seems a bit strange to say it, it's business as usual for us in terms of forward planning and forward focus. We are launching some workshops very soon to help our industry, in this time in terms of business planning. How do we go and get that right ambassador? All the things we need to bid for our events and to keep relevant. And we will soon be recognising our ambassadors through an ambassador recognition programme, another vital component of being out there, letting government, associations, organisations appreciate the value that our ambassadors bring to our destinations through what they do. So there's lots and lots happening. I've rattled through that. I'm really sorry. Hopefully you've taken some of it on board and you're able to sort of ask me some questions either now or later on. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Karen. That was a really good, I like the way you did it, really succinct. So we've just got a couple of questions come in. And one is from Matthew James. So the German authorities segmenting mass gatherings with the potential of reopening trade shows and events. What is the UK doing?
Am I on? So right here, right now, there's lots of discussion taking place, a whole raft of discussion taking place. I know for a fact that there are 2 meetings happening today, and those subjects are being discussed at those meetings. So I think it's fair to say I cannot comment on that right now, but I am heartened and everybody else should be heartened at the discussions that are taking place. And as soon as, and I mean as soon as, we have any news, Stephanie gets far too many emails from us now. So that will be the content of another email very soon. And then Stephanie can roll it out to her stakeholders and colleagues and members.
Yeah, great. And one other question really, Karen, just before we move on is, so the business visits and events as a sector, how is it being heard at government? How is it being heard by government, and what further assistance can we at Marketing Manchester or our colleagues across Greater Manchester lobby into government? How can we help you get a voice?
Okay, I'm going to do a shout out for Michael Hurst here. He is an amazing, amazing guy who has so much energy. It's like, please, can we bottle some of what you have? He is chair and has been for many years of the Business Visits and Events Programme, BVP. He is also chair of the Events Industry Board. So, being chair of those 2 groups and the Event Industry Board are a voice into government there, an advisor into government. I think there's on average 2 meetings that I'm involved in a week that take place in terms of talking to government about what's needed and so on. And again, I wish I could share with you the detail of the meetings that are taking place today, but there's some meetings taking place today, to talk about the next steps, where we go. UK Hospitality have just literally launched their roadmap. So movement is happening, and within the next 2 weeks, it will be a very, very clear roadmap as to what we do and how we move forward to get out of where we are.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks, Karen. So, and just to let everyone know that Marketing Manchester sits on that group that feeds into Maplehurst, so we're right at the heart of that. So whatever you say, we will then lobby into that group. Thanks, Karen. I'm going to move over to Martin Fullard from Conference News. Over to Martin.
Thanks, everyone. And like I say, Karen more or less took the words out of my mouth there. A big shout out to Michael Hurst and all the work he's been doing. Certainly my relationship with him's really been galvanised over the last couple of months as we've tried to paint a picture and understand what's going on. So I, as you would expect, being a journalist, have nothing more than a scribble of notes all over the place, but hopefully it will make sense in some manner of presentation. So I'm the editor of Conference News magazine, and I'm also the editorial director of MASH Media now, which means I get to preside over all the different titles and get some insight from all corners of the industry and from around the world as well. I wanted to quickly touch on the Business Visits and Events Partnership, which is chaired by Michael Hurst. And I hope most of you may have seen this. I published it about 2 or 3 weeks ago. The rather thinly read 191 page UK events report. Now, it highlights a lot of interesting information, but it kind of also highlights the need for the UK to realign and revitalise its commercial footprint after leaving the EU and the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak, to drive business back to the peak and to forge a new position on the global stage. And listening to Karen's presentation before, I'm really confident that the UK, Britain is in an absolutely solid position. So I think, where are we? I think if we're going to look internationally to another country to understand what one that's got it right, one to look up to, I really think that we should be looking to Germany. And it was interesting that someone actually noticed one of the questions. Now, as far as conferences are concerned right now, things are a little bit behind exhibitions, I think, in terms of the overall planning and the recovery. Actually, funnily enough, today, the Estonian Convention Bureau, I think they officially laid out their new kind of post-crisis welcome mat, I guess. They've started a new campaign to try and bring conference business back. I don't think Estonia was notably as hit by COVID-19 as maybe some of the bigger Western European nations. But I wanted to just touch on a couple of things that you might find interesting, and I can provide links to these if you want. UFI, which is the Global Association for the Exhibitions Industry, has published a framework essentially for good practice when it comes to running exhibitions around the world. And I think domestic markets will basically build their own frameworks based on this. Certainly the AEO, the Association of Event Organisers, and their affiliates will be working on similar plans, but using this as a groundwork. So the framework kind of outlines 5 key measures to be put in place during the build-up of an exhibition and during its operation. Ensure personnel and, of course, delegate or visitor safety. It ensures physical social distancing, an increase in health and safety measures, implementation of crowd control, and encouraging enforced measures. I think we have to be realistic here. When events are allowed to run, even if it's this year, there are going to be differences. Absolutely. Social distancing is still very much going to be something that's not going to be going away anytime soon. We need to be able to manage that. We need to get the show on the road as best as we can, but as safely as we can. So with that in mind, one of the first things Germany did, and I think it's fair to point out that, the Messe program, I guess that's what you call it, how it works in Germany is, the Messes effectively are all taxpayer funded. They have a much more structured layout format than we do here in the UK. They made the clear distinction between mass gatherings and organised events. And that's something that we've been rigorously campaigning for here in the UK. And again, that includes Visit Britain, I'm sure Karen will agree, and the BVEP and all the other trade associations. We need a clear distinction between organised events and mass gatherings. A mass gathering is queuing for Waitrose or B&Q. An organised event can be managed in such a way that people are kept safe. And I see no reason why that can't be done. So Germany were the first to do that. And of course, they have also, well, they're certainly lobbying for an additional 80 million euros of cash injection. So, I mean, as a country, Germany is very much on the ball here. They understand the importance of events, not just bringing people together, but to actually get the economy back going again. And events are intrinsically important to that. And I'll show you a slide in a minute with some interesting numbers which have come from this UK events report. Events can actually happen as early as the end of this month in Germany, in principle. But of course, I don't think anyone's going to jump on that first. I think from an organiser's perspective, a lot of people are kind of holding back. They don't really want to be the first to make that jump. That's anecdotal rather than anything set in stone. And of course, China, they're getting back to business as well. They actually ran an exhibition that ended last week, the Hunan Auto Show. And according to the organiser, they welcomed 62,000 delegates. Now, the delegates, or the visitors rather, had to be tested beforehand. They had to upload the test certificate, I believe. And when they arrived, they had to have their temperature checked. And then once they were in, they were confirmed to be clear, if you like, then they were able to go about the show. So they were very, very strict, draconian, but maybe if that's the small price to pay if we're going to get events running anytime soon. So exhibitions on the international scene, there seems to be a pulse out there. Conferences, congresses, business travel, a little bit behind. We wait and see what's going to come down the line. What's going to come down the line there. So I wanted to quickly touch on the UK scene. It was quite funny. I was started working on some presentation for this over the weekend and kind of got a bit fed up with it because I couldn't get it to work. I tried to make some sort of hierarchy flowchart to kind of show you how the structure in the UK works. So I'm going to try to remember here how to share my screen. Bear with me. Make sure I've got nothing incriminating up. Where are we? Okay, I think we're there. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to just quickly point out was the numbers. This is recorded in the UK events report, and this gives you an idea of how much the various different events sectors are worth to the UK economy every year. Now, this was the result of over a year's worth of work and obviously pre-COVID-19 figures. Regrettably, these figures will probably look very different.
I'm not sure. I can't see the screen. So if it's just me or if that's everybody, but I can still see you, which is fine. I can't see your slides.
Okay, guys. So what I'll do is I'm having trouble sharing the screen. I'll read them out to you. Conferences and meetings, 18.3 billion. Travel, 1.2 billion. Corporate outdoor events, 0.7 billion. Arts and cultural events, 5.6 billion. Festivals, fairs and shows, 6 billion. Music events, 17.6 billion. And sporting events, 9.6 billion. So a total of 70 billion pounds. So it's pretty serious numbers. And this is, I think, one of the biggest frustrations I've encountered over the last few months, or rather the frustrations from the industry, is that they feel that the government doesn't recognise this incredibly valuable contribution our industry makes. But I think over the last couple of months that the structure of the industry has become a bit clearer. And I think now, and I'm confident that the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and specifically the Tourism Minister, Nigel Huddleston, who is, I guess, our MP, is aware, it is sinking in that we are valuable. And as Karen rightly said, Michael Hurst, on his roles as the chair of the BVEP and the Events Industry Board, is working tirelessly to make sure that point is clear. But the DCMS, this is where the problem is. The DCMS, we can tell them everything we want. We can tell them everything, all the good things we do, but they have to lobby as hard to the Cabinet Office and the Treasury as we do to them. And that's where I think a lot of the frustrations come. We haven't had clear acknowledgement when they were announcing the lockdown measures initially, and the rates relief and the loans. Events businesses as independent businesses, as an independent sector, weren't clearly identified. It was just lumped in with hospitality. While that hasn't changed immediately now, I really do think it is beginning to change. And I reckon, as Karen said, meeting today, I reckon in the future, when we come out of this, we will have a more clearly defined industry. Before I kind of hand over to questions, because I'm interested in what you guys have to say to me, I just wanted to note that I can also reassure you that the trade associations are pushing for extended measures to safeguard our industry, which is going to be the last one to come back, really, with any sort of value. It includes extended measures for financial support, including an extension to the furlough scheme, a specific classification for events businesses. Of course, as I said, that's been a problem for loans, rate relief and so on. And of course, what we really want is to see, a very positive marketing campaign to combat coronaphobia, because don't forget, when events are allowed to happen again, there are still going to be a lot of anxious people out there, and we need to be able to allay those fears. As far as Manchester's concerned, I've always been excited about Manchester. I had the pleasure of coming up there about 5 or 6 times last year, and I've got a really good feel for it. I've met some really strong, some business owners and some event professionals in the city. I think you're an absolute powerhouse. And as was mentioned earlier, the fact you've moved up the ICA ranking to 82nd place, big feather in your cap. 35 ICA approved conferences in 2019. I mean, that is pretty good. That makes you a global player. And I think there was a really interesting news report came out of Lancashire Cricket Club, Emirates Old Trafford, the other week. See if I can bring that up in front of me so I can get the figures right. But they've made a huge investment in their events businesses, their events business. I think posting somewhere in the region of net profit of £5 million, something along those lines. But what it underlines is that there is an appetite for events.
Martin, if I can ask you to wrap up, just so I can allow some questions, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. My last point really would be, when we come out of this, guys, as far as Manchester's concerned, collaboration is key. If you can't take a booking, keep it in the city and pass it to another venue. But I'm really excited about Manchester. I'll stop rabbiting, and I'm interested to take any questions you might have.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So just one from me. You mentioned which you thought would come last out of lockdown. So which, in terms of events from the sectors you see coming out first, outdoor exhibitions, conferences, etc.? Who's first out the blocks for us?
My gut feeling is internal conferences will be first, as companies go back to work and will want to galvanise their teams, maybe domestic incentive travel as well. That will be the first. I suspect exhibitions will be the last, but again, it's going to take the people running them to really show some drive to get them going. Yeah, okay. And another question from the floor, so from Matthew. Higher Space have created a safer venue accreditation framework, you might be aware, with 6 key areas. Wouldn't that be better as a national standard? Yes, it would. National standards we need to think about, because we need to make sure, we need to ask who are policing them. And I think that anyone can set up a standard, but who is policing them? Higher Space one is absolutely great, but if it's voluntary sign up, then we've got to make sure that something is applicable across the industry. So we need a bigger discussion on that, but we're on the right path. Great, lovely. Thanks, Martin. Just for anyone who's joined us this morning, we will be not only giving you the webinar link for this, but we'll also be putting the reports that have been mentioned on our website, so Marketing Manchester website. We've got a support hub there, so that'll go on there sometime in the next 24 hours. Okay, thanks, Martin. So now I'm going to move on to Sarah Paling from Ocean Media. Sarah.
Hi. For you that don't know me, I work for Ocean Media Group, and we have a variety of different portfolios and sectors that we work in, many of which have a presence in Manchester. I sit on the senior management team for Ocean Media Group, so at the moment I've got an overall view of what we're what we're doing. And as you can imagine, and much of it has been mentioned before with Karen and Martin, we're in a process of postponing, rescheduling and moving into a virtual world at the moment. But my main role looks after our biggest portfolio at Ocean, which is the housing portfolio, and one of the biggest events, Europe's largest housing festival, that takes place usually in Manchester every year in June. My role today was to talk you through what we're doing short, medium and long term as a media company, but I think what I'll be telling you about is what I've seen echoed by a lot of other media companies out there right now. Just to give you an idea, in a normal year, my portfolio, housing, brings in about £11 million worth of revenue. That's roughly split 50% print and digital, 50% by large-scale events. So you can imagine the time we're having right now, where 50% of our revenue's just gone for this year. The current situation actually for us is the clearest of what we need to be doing. We've all been told that we can't run large-scale events at the moment. So we had an event in June, we rescheduled it to September, thought we were really, really clever, thought what could possibly go wrong by rescheduling our conference to the month of September. And obviously now we're looking at actually not being able to run in September. And we don't have the confidence to move it again because we're not sure that anything will have actually changed by October or November. So we're now looking at moving that portfolio into a virtual offering for 2020. To put it into perspective for our sector and the event's it was his 70th year. So the event has been around in different peripatetic forms and different guises, but it was our 70th year. People have found their husbands, wives at our conference. It's kind of something some people have been coming for the last 30 years. So it's a massive move for us to move it into the virtual world, and one that we're still experimenting with right now. All media companies actually do is curate content and then commercialize it. So that's what we do, what Conference News do, what any media does is we produce great content and then sell it in some way, shape or form. When the print media moved into the digital world, we all went through a journey of how that would look, and it's actually quite a similar journey that we're doing at the moment, moving a face-to-face event into the virtual world. The biggest impact, which was very similar to the print, is that you can't command the same revenues right now. But actually, because the costs are far reduced and the risk isn't there, you still can operate at a certain margin. The early signs for us have been quite encouraging in terms of keeping our audience through this period. We decided about a month and a half ago to launch a digital housing week in our original week of June when we're normally on site. We launched it by sending out one soft launch email to our audience, and 14,000 people from one soft launch without any speakers or any information saved the event to their diary. We didn't make the event free because for us it was a long-term plan. It was just to show that we were there for our sector, that we were still looking to provide them with content. But I think certainly at the moment we can say we've got a bit of short-term success through this period. The trickiest time for me is the medium term. As Martin and Karen have talked about, is government are not willing at all to give clear timelines on any of the lockdown processes. And so we're really in the dark as to what we're planning for right now. The big one for me, and it's been mentioned previously, is even if the restrictions are lifted, which I don't expect them to be, but even if they are, it's that confidence. It's will people have the appetite to come to large events? And for me, in a B2B portfolio, will employers allow them to come? Most venues, including Manchester Central, who we have our closest relationship with, have been working on what large events can look like coming out of this period, and if social distancing is still in place. And there's definitely some common themes emerging from all of the work that we've seen. But for Ocean, us, we think we'd have to really totally reinvent the event space. looking at why people come to the event. So 50% of our delegates say they come for content, 50% say networking. Our exhibitors and sponsors all come to get in front of this high-level audience. But we don't need to build booths. We don't need to put on drinks receptions. We'd actually start to really sort of look at how the venue, the city, can offer all of that, but possibly in a different way. I was asked to sort of expand a bit on what we do with the venue. We definitely rely on the venue and all of the venues that we work with, Olympia, Excel, Manchester Central, to offer best practice measures for health and safety, but they do that wonderfully anyway. So it's just an adaptation of what they already do. And for all of us event operators, we all would need to follow similar guidelines, look at some form of regulation that we'd all adhere to, but we pretty much do that now anyway. I think by sharing technology, procuring in bulk, collaboration, which was mentioned before, we can start to show our delegates and visitors that it can be done. And I think we need to share with our competitors. This is a time where we all together need to come with a joint voice and give people confidence that we can make events not only safe but enjoyable again. It's been touched on, and I put it down to mention, but I again echo what Martin was saying. I think we've been really. I work on secondment with government for part of our portfolio, and I think our sector, the events industry, has been really bad in the past at actually sort of having a voice at the top table with cabinet and actually showing what our worth is. For us, we estimate when we're in town in Manchester. We bring in about £5 million worth of inward investment. For anybody that's on the call from the Midland or Radisson Hotel, you'll benefit from a lot of that yourselves. Our sector likes to build up quite a healthy bar bill, but it is just getting all of those numbers in place so we can talk with a united voice and talk about investment and because that's what's really going to matter to government at the moment. The city, and again, echoing Martin, the city is amazing at offering up a joined up approach. For the 9 years we've been here, we've had an amazing relationship with us, the council, the venue, Marketing Manchester, all of your supply chain, and some of the local suppliers to us as well. Moving forward, you're really well equipped to offer even more for us. And I think looking at our relationship in other areas like London and Birmingham, you're leaps and bounds ahead of those now. So it's a great time for you to be able to look at what you're doing as a city. The longer term for us is next year, and who knows? I mean, I hope for so many reasons, personal and work, that the world's come back to normal a bit. I think the one thing that we'll definitely take away longer term is that we'll be using technology far more to reach wider audiences, but nothing. My team, unfortunately, saved me from it, but have sat through every single tech demo imaginable of how we can put on large-scale events in the virtual world, and nothing as yet replaces anything near to the face-to-face experience you can get from bringing people into a room on site, sharing a drink, sharing the after sort of après-ski element of an event. So we know that we can't wait to come back to the normal world for our delegates and visitors. I think it's been an incredibly challenging time for us all. The numbers that Kerrin went over show how challenging it's been for all as businesses. But in a way, I think we can come out stronger. I think we can all innovate, and I think we can all think a bit more about how we put on amazing sort of hybrid events running into the future. Thanks.
Sarah, that's what a great roundup. Goodness. And in terms of, you mentioned a question, 14 delegates have signed up or put the saved an event to the diary. It was a free event, but just to wrap up, and a question that's come out is, how is that virtual hybrid platform, how will that affect people who are they willing still to pay the same fees?
So we're about to put that to the test, and what we've done is we have Ocean Media. So my platform works in housing, and we probably, we own about, I would say about 70% of the route to market in housing across print, digital and conferences. But with two very strong membership bodies, the National Housing Federation and the Chartered Institute of Housing, we all run small conferences together. What we've agreed, and although they're our main competitors in a way, we've all agreed to protect our rates. So we're all going out with slightly cheaper rates, which is right, because we don't have a DDR rate when we're running in the virtual world. But we are all looking to charge roughly the same rate, less, about £100 per rate. So if it was the £600 delegate rate, we're going to stick to £500, and we've agreed across the board to do that. So we're not undercutting each other. We actually think virtual events can deliver content as we are doing now. They're just not the same. And thankfully, they aren't the same. But in terms of what you get in terms of CPD and good speakers, you get it digitally.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another question comes from Beth Lincoln. How will we know when it's safe to offer live events again? I guess wrapped up in that, when do you see events returning to normal, if there is a?
Yeah, so what we've done at Ocean, which seems to be the same with everybody, is everybody moved all of their spring events into the autumn. So everybody did that. Very few people cancelled events at that stage. Obviously, we are now, like a lot of other event organisations, not confident about the autumn period. We have left some of our live events still in the November, December. Yeah. And we'll make a decision on those further down. It goes back to the paper that Manchester Central have done. Is we can operate now in a very similar way to the queuing system that's operated at a Waitrose store or something. It's whether we can actually provide a good experience by doing it that way. I hope, and the question that I'd ask the government right now is that they consider all events similar to Germany, that they consider us all differently. I think bringing in something like a music festival where it would be a shame not to serve alcohol would be different to bringing in a quite boring traditional housing conference like the one I run. So I'd hope they'd sort of release us all on a sort of like a gradual path, and not do a one-size-fits-all approach. Shona, I think it will depend. I live in Manchester. I work in London. As soon as the tube opens properly, and as soon as people are back at work, we're not asking people to be any different than getting on a train or walk into London when everyone's back in the city. So hopefully it will all start to come back with some health and safety measures included.
Yeah, great. Good answer. I mean, so it's just there's a lot of uncertainty. We're just talking to the TFGM team here, and with 10% compared with business as usual in terms of capacity, it's just how will people get around at the same time. Yeah. Sarah, thank you so much. We're going to move on now to our last speaker, Sean Hines, who's the Chief Executive at Manchester Central. So over to Sean.
Thanks, Sarah, for the insight. I'm glad you got the question from Beth, actually. That was one I was hoping to duck. So let me, the good news about going finally, if you like, is that all of the good stuff has been said, and all of the numbers that have been spoken about this morning from everybody else that's already spoken. I mean, it gives you a sense of the scale of the industry, and also the kind of challenge that we all face in terms of getting back to some kind of semblance of normality. So I've got a few things to talk about relating to Manchester Central, and it's sort of in no particular order, I suppose. First of all, just picking up on what Sarah was talking about, and I am slightly biased in this, but I don't think that virtual events are anywhere near the real thing, and I'm glad about that. And I think what the last few weeks has certainly allowed me to do, and I'm sure many of the people tuning in as well, have done is to participate in some, and you know, in having been a participant and having spoken actually to some of the organizers of those events to get their feedback following, you know, it's clear that there are challenges ahead if the virtual world was the only world that we had to look forward to. You know, most of the events that I've seen from some of our organizers have been free. And as a result of that, and as a result of people having time on their hands, the attendance of those events has been reasonably good. This week alone, I joined a global hospitality event, an event that was due to take place in March in Berlin, which they obviously had to cancel, and they put it online this week. 5,000 attendees, good global coverage, but riddled with challenges and problems, you know, whether it was the technology, because of course we're all relying on each other's bandwidth to actually get a clear, good production value so that you can ensure engagement. And there was all sorts of sound and video issues that they were contending with. The level of engagement, therefore, and in terms of the interactions that you would get in a live event, even on a panel. When you had a panel of people talking together, it was very stunted, and just was simply not the experience that people want when they come to events. And you know, Sarah touched on things like drinks receptions, the informal networking, just the fact that people are keen to be around that hub of activity when that particular show comes to town. You know, that halo effect of just being there is so important to many people and justifies why so many people go. So because of that, I'm really optimistic about how we're going to return to operating live events again. I'm not that certain in terms of how long it's going to take us to get there. There are so many factors that we're contending with, and clearly government advice has to be the lead on this, and I think it's going to be a slow process. And I think that what we'll see with our sorts of events, particularly the scale of events that take place inside Manchester Central, you know, it's going to take a bit longer for the confidence to come back, for corporate policies to allow for delegates, speakers, exhibitors to get involved in that. But I'm 100% confident that it's going to come. I just think it's going to take a bit of time. And not wishing to sort of get into the detail of COVID or anything like that, but you know, certainly the emergence of a vaccine or a treatment is going to accelerate that process. I think it's in terms of confidence. So that's my take on virtual events. But whilst we have this opportunity, as we do at the moment, it's great to be able to connect. I think what I took away from the event this week was that the audience that you can appeal to, getting 5,000 people tuned into content, tuned into speakers, I think that's incredibly valuable. And I think in the future, we will see these events taking place in real life, but being complemented by the virtual presentation as well, which gives organizers the opportunity to appeal to a much wider audience, to extend the life of their event much wider than just the 2 or 3 days of the event, but actually have a lot of pre and post engagement and activity with clients. So I think we'll see great use of technology as a result of what we've gone through. Just wanted to touch on some of the stuff that got spoken about earlier on as well, that Martin and Karen were talking about. And one thing that's become very clear in this, and look, just to let you all know, I sit on a number of industry groups, AEV, Association of Event Venues. We're part of the Events Industry Alliance. There's a number of similar groups in the industry. I think what it's told us, if you take the entire events landscape, it's very fragmented. And I think that fragmentation has led to some dilution in terms of getting that voice up to government that we were talking about. The route in, absolutely, has been via BVEP, the organization chaired by Michael Hurst that we were talking about, and then those guys feeding into DCMS to get that message across. And the key message has been the distinction between mass gatherings and organized gatherings. I think, and Karen's probably a bit closer to this than me, I'm not sure that we've got the absolute cut through that we would like to have had to get that clarity across, certainly not in the way that perhaps Germany and some other jurisdictions, Korea, for example, has been able to do. But I'm hopeful that will continue to come. In terms of standards, absolutely agree that some form of consistent standard is going to be required to provide both corporates and delegates the confidence and assurance that when they come to any type of event, they're going to see similar things happen. And that they can relate to those things, and those things are being delivered consistently. As Sarah mentioned, we've spent a bit of time ourselves consulting with some of our clients. I've got a document here that we've compiled of some of the measures that we've been considering, have now received significant feedback from some of our client organisers on that particular document. We've also been feeding that up into the industry groups as well, so that when we come up with, if you like, a venue standard, it is consistent across all of the major venues that put on organised events. And I know in the hotel industry, the Hospitality Association is working on a set of standards, which I think is due to be released this Friday. So it's really important, as one of the question, I think it was Matthew mentioned, to get consistency though is critical, because we can't all be going off doing our own thing, because it just leads to confusion, and it leads to, potential failure about, somebody doing one thing and somebody else doing something else. For example, you've got a document here which has come from an organizer, a group of organisers actually, called All Secure Standards, talks about 4 key principles. Those key principles are the same ones that we've been looking at in terms of physical distancing, hygiene, and so on. So work is continuing on making sure that we can get to a point where those standards are both consistent and deliverable. But here's the rub. Some of them would make going to an event absolutely tragic, and in many cases would make an event unviable. And we have to realize that that's the case. And that's why timing for me is so critical, because I think as time passes, and as the confidence levels restore, and as what isn't possible today becomes possible tomorrow, and in 3 weeks' time is considered normal, then those are the steps that are going to help us get back. You take simple things like a drinks reception. For many events, the first night drinks reception is actually one of the most valuable happenings during the event for a lot of people. To make those reconnections, to establish the times when you're just going to have that informal meeting, when you're going to take that time to discuss something which may lead to something else. That's why people go to real life events, and whatever you say, you can't replicate that online. And you can have all the best technology and all the best sponsors, hubs and interactive websites and all of that shenanigans, but it does not replace the real thing. And so I think we have to be realistic about what an experience would be. And right now we're happy to queue up outside B&Q for 50 minutes to buy our paint and our sandpaper and all that kind of stuff. And if we're going to the tip, we'll sit in a car for 2 hours because we have to, because that's just what it is. Give it a month from now, give it 2 months from now. First of all, those measures would have probably been relaxed. And secondly, we're going to be less tolerant of stuff like that anyway. And in all of that time, understanding and confidence about where the virus has got to, and maybe where treatments or vaccines have got to, will be helping our recovery. So where does that leave Manchester Central? Well, obviously, large scale event in the middle of the city of Manchester. We were just getting to grips with dealing with the effect of COVID when I got the phone call from the military to say they wanted to come around and have a look to see if they could set up a hospital. And what followed was 3 weeks of the most extraordinary activity inside the venue. And this is in a context of, we are very used to transforming our space. We're very used to creating these new worlds temporarily inside our space, and then taking it down again, and then a day later doing it all again for something different. But myself and the team that were involved, we've never seen anything like what we experienced during that time. So right now, our immediate destiny is determined by the virus and is determined by the NHS. We currently expect to be a medical facility until the end of July. We expect to be decommissioning in August, and we expect to be back in business in September. That's what my contract says, and that's what we're working to. However, I'm a pragmatist. My team is a realist. We know the situation we're in, and therefore there's a lot of uncertainty as to how quickly we're going to achieve that timeline, and indeed whether or not the NHS may come back to us and say, well, you know what, we probably need a bit longer. Distinct possibility, and regardless of what politicians and our mayor may say, there's a very small group of people involved in determining the destiny, if you like, and the future of the venue, and one of those people is me, and a couple of other people in the NHS are also involved in that discussion. So we're working obviously clearly very closely to get clarity on that topic, because I think what we all know on this call is you can't think about running an event on Saturday and turn up on Monday and do it. It's the sales cycle, it's the planning cycle, it's all of the detail that feeds up into the commencement of the event, which leads us to a 3-4 month lead time just to get an event going. So it's no good to be in a situation where we just don't know. So we're drilling for certainty, and I'm pretty confident that by the end of this month I'm going to have certainty as to what the future for Manchester Central looks like. It's been an amazing experience for the venue. The venue, as most of you know, has a very rich history from the original time as a railway station to where we are now as a hospital. And this will be another chapter in our history. But let me tell you, there's nothing more appealing and nothing more exciting for myself and my team than the prospect of getting our venue back and getting into the business of live events again, because finally, just the last couple of minutes, Manchester is an event city, whether it's sport, whether it's concerts, whether it's the city events, whether it's the business events, leisure events. We thrive on that activity. Every pound in the venue equals £5 in the bars, hotels, restaurants around us. So it's critical for the prosperity of the city that events come back. And it's also a catalyst for societal and economic recovery. So we've got continued work to do to get that message across loud and clear. But I think we will get there. And I think the pace at which we will see recovery will be just as quick as the pace with which this current crisis unfolded.
Brilliant, Sean, as passionate as always. I think we could spend a couple of hours just talking about you setting up the hospital. But in terms of events, there's a couple of questions that have just come through. So two questions specific for you. So will Manchester Central offer a hybrid event package to organisers? And also a lot of talk about event planners and venues changing the booking conditions. How will you be changing yours?
Okay, so in terms of hybrid, I think absolutely. From a venue perspective, the requirement is around connectivity, technical infrastructure, capability, that kind of thing. And we're very lucky in Manchester Central. We've got very robust Wi-Fi, very robust internet bandwidth coming in. We have broadcast quality bandwidth coming into the venue by virtue of some of the stuff we do with political conferences and being connected to the Manchester Loop, which gets out to Media City and all the broadcast companies. So I think the prospect of hybrid events inside the venue is absolutely a real one. We've got some great spaces that lend themselves to that very well. Our auditorium theatre, for example, is excellent for the combination of real-time present events as well as it being broadcast out. So I see that. In terms of terms and conditions, look, I think my sales and marketing team, some of which are on the line, listening into this event, we're dealing with clients every day, and what's become very clear is there's not one rule that resolves every situation in terms of particular events, particular clients. And the last thing we're doing is looking at the rule book and saying, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. Every solution is going to be an individual solution for each event and the circumstances surrounded by that event. We are, as a business, we are motivated to see the resumption of events as quickly as effectively and as safely as possible. Does that mean we're going to be flexible around our terms and conditions? Absolutely. Does that mean that we're going to offer more time, more space? You know, are we going to be commercially attractive if we can, if we've got the space and time to do it? Absolutely, we will. We're in the business of recovery. We're in the business of getting events back online. And we're not going to do that if we sit there looking at our contract saying, well, you can't do that because it says on page 76 that you can't do it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to wider questions now and bring the speakers all back in. So just to try and summarise what our brilliant speakers covered this morning. So Karen, very strong in terms of the challenge that we've got, but equally, we think we've got strong leadership feeding into government. Standards expected, although they're tricky. In terms of point from Sean, tricky because of the fragmentation of the industry, and that one voice has perhaps not been as strong going in. There's an ask coming out in terms of the differentiation between mass gatherings and organised events, which I'll come back to. Then from Martin, saw GM as a global player. We're punching our weight, we're right in there. And from Sarah, adding to that, Manchester is a really strong partnership for conferences to come and host, which is another strength. And also about virtual events having their place. They have great value in terms of accessing speakers and good content. But on the balance to it, Sean talked about the importance of that face-to-face events. And I know personally, and in terms of the business that's actually done at events, it's in the in-between times through the conference that's really valuable in those live events. And there's a smattering running right through this about our technology, which we know that Manchester is really an innovative city. So trying to just wrap up. So I've got one question which I'll leave to the end for all of you, but just picking out some of the questions that have come in. So for Karen, if I could ask you, just a couple have come in. So will there be, this come from Laura and one from Faye, will there be funding available to venues to support the implementation of standards and measures in order to help them reopen? And another one came in from Faye just about, we mentioned the roadmap that was going to be out in a couple of weeks' time. What is there more detail in that roadmap, and how can we get hold of that? So over to Karen.
Okay, I'll start with the second one first. I've got some information that I actually received this morning. So this is all happening fast, and it's really exciting, and it's very, very new. But because it's happening fast, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll have something in place. So this national standard is being created so that businesses can get back to doing business. So I'm just going to run through the kind of thing that it will be. It will be online. There will be questions. That there will be no more than 20 questions, but you will jump questions if you are a member of a trade body who, you know, we know are well ahead in some areas of this kind of, let's say, kite mark safety standard. But although I don't want to use the word safety, you know, so they'll kind of be fast tracked through the system. It's guidance for the smaller businesses of what they need to know. It'll be an online platform, and before you move on, you have to read Public Health England and WHO information. Tick to say that you've read it, and then you can move forward. Questions, then there'll be housekeeping at the end, an agreement, tick, sign, email, so that as we evolve out of this kind of place, we need to be able to contact the individuals who've signed up to this national standard certificate. There will be certificates, there will be links, so that there will be emblems to show that you are part of this scheme. There will be spot checks. So I think all of what I've heard is actually coming into play. We're just getting the final sign off, and then this will go out. And at the same time, we'll have two campaigns. I'm thinking one externally, one internally. The external one tells the world, domestically, internationally, hey, you know, come to us. I've got to be careful with the words I use. And then the internal one will tell the businesses, you know, we can open our doors and get back to doing business and, you know, being part of the industry that we love. So it's not telling you exactly, but it's kind of giving you an outline of where we're going. With regards to funding, we all know that there's been a whole raft of funding. The last fund that came out of Developing England Fund, which was the DMO Resilience Fund. So that was bid for, there was a pot of money there. I don't know the answer. But what I do know is that, in our journey, where there has been a need, there has been something delivered. And, with the ask could come a solution. But I can't give you that answer.
Karen, great. And a question really for Martin, I think, and perhaps Sean and Sarah can come in on it. With innovation, we know that Manchester's great innovation, the sector is. So what best practice have you seen that we could adopt in terms of conferencing going forward that you've seen in other countries, other cities that it's worth sharing today?
The rules are being made up as we kind of go along, really. It depends what context you're kind of asking, really. On a granular level, event to event, Sean hit the nail on the head when he was speaking, that all events are going to be hybrid going forward. The digital concept, like what we're doing now, is fine, but this all comes down to this idea of what is your business objective. That will decide whether you decide you need to run a live event or a virtual one or digital, whatever. As far as best practice is concerned, the quality of that production is going to go up. If you're going to have a consistent use for digital events, digital addition to your event, then there are agencies now already building specific studios to really develop a high quality. What we're all doing now is grand, but we've all been kind of caught on the back foot. The quality is going to go up. In terms of a citywide kind of scale of making that happen, I mean, that's that there isn't really a best practice guide at the moment, apart from the German structure of the messes and how they're all state funded is great in an ideal world, but I can't really ever see that happening here, not in my lifetime anyway. Although it would be a great thing to have. But yeah, people are going to need to be dynamic. Remember, budgets are likely going to be cut, and I'm talking more maybe from the corporates here. When it comes to their conferences, people are going to be asking, well, why can't we just do this digital event if it costs only a fraction of the amount? But again, you can't put a price on that physical interaction. And face-to-face will always be the best. Choose live.
Great. Thanks, Martin. Good answer. And so my last question for all our panelists really is, so you've got 30 seconds with Boris Johnson. So what's the thing you're going to ask him? Let's start with Sarah.
So on a personal level, I'd ask him not to listen to anything that Donald Trump says. But on a work level, I would say just don't approach all events in a similar way. Before you make a blanket ban on events longer term, let us know how we can deliver large events differently so we can resume as quickly as possible. And I fully echo what Sean and Martin have said. Live events are the way forward. We're just having to work in a virtual world right now.
Thanks, Sarah. Sean, what would you ask Boris?
I'd ask him if he's going to run the party conference in September. Perhaps if I had a bit longer. I'd then ask him if he realises the commercial value of that particular event. When you look at the number of sponsors, the amount of money that is spent by corporates, by companies, by groups, associations that want to be a part of that gathering. If he understands that just for his event, it equals this much money. What is it worth to us? 15 million? Is it something like that? I don't know. As a city. I would wonder if he then understood that if you multiplied that out by the scale of events that are taking place, just why business events are so critical to the recovery of the economy.
Thanks, Sean. And Martin?
I'd remind him that his life is a series of events, from Prime Minister's questions to daily briefings, to press calls, to trips. Everything he does is facilitated by the events industry in some capacity, literally everything. So I'd like him to maybe just come out and acknowledge that.
Yeah, good one, Martin. And Karen, finally?
Well, I would tell him what a great job he did as Mayor of London, and he supported many bids for events that were won for the city. So I feel that he gets events, and I would actually ask him what he would like us to do. Because sometimes, rather than wait to be told what to do, sometimes it's nice to offer up your sort of help and maybe a few suggestions along the way. So I would be saying, what is it you want us to do out of everything?
Yeah, that's a really good point to end on. And if there are any great ideas out there, please come forward. We can collate them and push them up into core cities, into DCMS or Visit Britain, whatever. So thank you for all of that. Thank you. Great speakers. Thanks for getting involved. I think the future does look bright. Huge challenges ahead, absolutely. Got to come back stronger together. And by goodness, the other destinations will be absolutely out there champing at the bit.
Yeah.
So I think if we know we can be organised together, collaborate, we know we can do that. We know Manchester's really good at that. And I think a joined up offer, because we know that destinations are usually chosen first when looking at events. So if there are any further comments, send them through to myself or Steph Newton. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be sending you out the links and any papers, and look onto Marketing Manchester's website for any more information. So thanks again for joining. Thanks to speakers again, and be stronger together. That's the message I'll leave with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.